Now you're gonna need a little bit of wall space. Okay, so I'm gonna use these two boxes. You don't need much vertical height on the wall. We're gonna be laying on our ground, our feet are laying on the ground, and our feet will be up on the wall. For me, I'll just utilize these boxes for a better camera angle. All you will need other than that are a couple yoga blocks, and that's likely it. We're gonna start by warming up our hips specific to IR. If you have not done your cars today, make sure you do so. We won't be doing cars specifically in today's class. We will be doing what are called capsular cars, which is axial rotation at various angles. We'll start with our right hip. We're gonna go into left side lying. If you have one yoga block, you can place it under your head. If you have a pillow, feel free to use a pillow. The other block's gonna go between our thighs. So with that block between your thighs, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with our knees bent and our hips bent to about 90 degrees, okay? So find 90 degrees so that you have an idea of where that is. And then with your hips, I actually want you to come just above that if you can do so without any closing angle pain or discomfort in the front of your hip. We're gonna maintain this 90-degree angle of knee bend, and we're gonna try and keep that the whole time. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spin my thigh inwards such that my foot comes up in the air, utilizing all this side hip tissue. We're gonna hold for a second or two at the top, and then we're gonna slowly parachute back down, okay? If you need to take this hand and place it on your pelvis, make sure that your pelvis isn't hiking up. We don't need lumbar side flexion happening in order to get that foot up. I want it all to come from your hip. So from your pelvis up should be silent. We're moving your femur on your pelvis, but we don't want the pelvis to move, so minimize it as best you can. So again, just above 90 degrees, starting with the right side, spin that thigh inwards, rotate as far as you can. Now squeeze a little bit more out at the top, and then we're gonna slowly lower back down. We're gonna come right back up for rep 2. Internally rotate, squeeze a bit more out at the top, parachute down. And one more time, rep 3. Squeeze a little bit more out at the top and parachute down. Now we're gonna come to approximately 90 degrees or just below that. We're gonna repeat the exact same thing here at a slightly different angle. Spin that thigh inwards, find that lateral thigh tissue, squeeze and hold, bring it back down. 2 more. Internally rotate, squeeze and hold, parachute down. And now last one here. Internally rotate, squeeze a little bit more out, find that side hip tissue, parachute down. And now we're gonna drop our knees down a little bit further. So think like 10-15 degrees, opening up this angle between your belly and your femur. We're gonna do the exact same thing here. You're gonna notice it's gonna be a little harder to control your pelvis here. So make sure that you're 1, not hiking up, and 2, not rolling forward. So keep your hips stacked right on top of each other. Same exact exercise though, rotate that thigh inwards, squeeze and fight for more at the top. Notice how it feels a little bit different here. Parachute back down. We're biasing slightly different fibers now when we do this. Internally rotate, squeeze and hold. Parachute back down. And one more time. Rotate, squeeze and hold. And parachute down. Now we're going to switch over to the other side, so I'll meet you there. All right, so we're going to do the same exact thing on the left side now. Find 90 degrees of hip bend and knee bend, then close off that hip angle, again, but making sure you don't feel any pressure pinching in the front of the hip. If you do, just dial it back a bit. Hand on the pelvis if you need, or you can clasp them together or squeeze something or do whatever you would like for an upper body tension strategy. Just make sure that this pelvis does not move. So again, we're going to internally rotate, squeeze that side hip, fight for a little bit more at the top, keep it honest, pelvis does not move, and then we're going to parachute back down. Rep 2, rotate up, squeeze a little bit more out at the top, slowly parachute down, and the last rep in this position. Internally rotate, squeeze a little bit more out, slowly parachute down. Knees are going to drop to 90 degrees or just below that. Knees stay bent to 90 degrees. And same exact thing, internally rotate, squeeze out as much as you can, parachute down, back up for 2, rotate and squeeze, parachute down, and rep 3. Squeeze as much out of that hip as you can. Keep it all in the hip though, don't let the pelvis join the party. Parachute down and then drop another 15 degrees. We're gonna do the exact same thing one more time. Internally rotate, don't roll yourself forward though, keep your belly button pointed straight ahead. Slowly lower down. Rep 2, keep it all in the hip, squeeze and hold, slowly lower. Last one, rotate, squeeze and hold, and parachute down. Okay, so we're gonna start with a little hip stretch. Now I'm gonna give you 2 options here. The first option is a little bit more aggressive, okay, when it comes to a hip capsular stretch. So if this option is too aggressive for you when you try it, you can fast forward to the setup where our feet are up on the wall and you can do your stretch there bilaterally. What this will look like is we're gonna be lying on our backs, and I'll give you a front view here. So if I'm lying on my back, I'm gonna drop my knee downwards such that my knee kind of falls in front of my hip. I don't wanna be too narrow so that my knee is too far inwards, and I don't wanna be too far out to the side. So now what this will look like from the side, it'll look like this. So again, same thing, I'm gonna drop that knee inwards. Now you can play with a few different variables here, especially if you have knee pain or any knee pathology. So I can change my angle of knee bend, I can open it up a little bit, I can close it off a little bit, and I can play with my angle of tibia rotation. So I could stuff something underneath the ball of my foot to keep my foot in tibia external rotation, or I could stuff something underneath the heel of my foot to keep my tibia in tibia internal rotation. So if you experience any medial knee discomfort, so any discomfort on the inside of your knee when you do that, I recommend trying one of those variations. And if you still experience discomfort in that position, even with those variations, I would then fast forward to the feet up on the wall, and you can do your stretch in that position, and I'll show you how when we get to that part. So you can just fast forward through this part, jump to that setup, and then you'll hear me describe how we can do it there. When we do it here, we're actually gonna do it single leg, meaning I'm just gonna do one leg at a time, and you'll see why. So when I drop that knee inwards, I'm searching for kind of a stretching, uncomfortable sensation in my hip. If I'm really tight, I might even feel it kind of into my quad and down my leg, and it'll be a little bit different from person to person. But I don't want to feel any pinching, any pressure, discomfort in my groin when I do this. You can also play with different angles. So though I don't want you way out here or way across here, that doesn't mean that you have to be straight away. You can play with slightly different angles and kind of scour your hip and see where you get your biggest return on investment. Once you do that, if you already feel a good stretching sensation there, I'm just gonna ask you to hang out here. But make sure that your right glute doesn't start to pop up off the ground. So we wanna keep that pelvis anchored to that side, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to rotate the ball in the socket, which is your pelvis. But we don't want that socket coming along for the ride. Otherwise, the tissue that we're trying to access that overlies the ball in the socket now gets missed, and we end up feeding into low back stuff, and we don't want that. So keep that pelvis anchored. You can almost even think about tucking your tailbone underneath you a little bit, which you'll feel your kind of abdominals and glute engage. Stay heavy on that side hip as that knee drops inwards. Now, if this is, again, enough, you can just hang out and stretch. But if you're here and you're like, all right, like, I don't really feel much of a stretch here, you can then overpressure it a little bit using your other leg. So what I would then do is take this leg up, externally rotate, take my heel of my other foot, and then use it to pull that knee down just a little bit further, making sure that my whole pelvis does not go along for the ride as I do so. And then you would just hang out and stretch like this. So I want you guys to just bank some time here, hang out. We're just gonna stretch for a little while. We're gonna give our right hip capsule a little bit of time to stretch. Then we're gonna give our left hip capsule a little bit of time to stretch. We're gonna do 1 pales in each position, just at a low level, just to warm that capsular tissue up, start putting some force through it, but we're not gonna jump right to max effort. And then we'll slowly increase the intensity as we work through the rest of the stuff in class. Now, if this is tissue that's really tight for you, I want you to hit pause and bank 2 to 3 minutes on each hip, just stretching here. Just hang out and stretch. Play on your phone, watch TV, do whatever you want. I really don't care. Ultimately, like, you're gonna get the most out of it if you literally just hang out here and breathe, try and focus on the sensation in your hip, make sure your pelvis stays anchored, and just try and think about breathing into that tissue. The more that you focus on this stuff, the more you're gonna get out of it versus if you're distracted. But for some people, that's their motivation to do it. Like, well, I could just stretch while I'm on my phone, or I could stretch while I'm scrolling Instagram or whatever it may be. And I mean, at that point, really it's better to stretch and do something else than to not do it at all. So you can kind of choose which one you want to go with, but I do recommend banking a little more time if you need it. The way that we're going to do pails, so you can just keep stretching while I walk you through this leg's going to come up, but instead of over pressuring us down, it's actually just going to function as a wall there. Okay, so it's going to give us something to push into, but it's not taking us deeper into the stretch for the pails contraction. So you're just going to use that foot and block yourself there, and then we're going to slowly drive up into it, imagining trying to do this motion, which is external rotation, but we're not going to move at all. This leg's going to make sure that we stay still. So really, you end up doing pails for IR while you're doing pails for ER on the opposite leg. So both legs are working, and you should be working hard here to stabilize and make sure that your pelvis stays anchored. So you can join me here now, cross that leg over, take a big breath into your lower abdomen, give me that 360-degree expansion, and slowly start to drive up into your left foot, just like a 2 out of 10. Keep it light, thinking rotate out of the stretch. Work up to a 4 out of 10. And now give me like a 5 out of 10, like half as hard as you think you could. And we're gonna hold this for a little while now. So maintain that effort. We're gonna send some blood to this deep capsular tissue and into that deep hip stuff. Warm that tissue up. Prepare that capsule for what's to come. Keep it at 50% though. Try not to let it increase, try not to let it decrease. Try and keep it at an even 50%. And keep holding that. We're not doing the rails on this one, we're just doing pails. We're just getting that blood flowing to that tissue. 5 seconds, you're gonna relax. 4, 3, 2, 1. Very good. That foot can come off. That leg can come out. Whew. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna take my left leg, I'm gonna walk it out to the side, I'm gonna drop it inwards. If I need to, I can take my opposite foot up, drag it down, and then hang out and stretch. So again, banking time here. If this is tight for you, make sure you hit pause, repeat everything that I just said before. Something else that you can do as well, if you're hanging out in this position, you don't even have that leg up here, but you just like dropping down like that feels like a lot. You have the option of placing an object that you can lean into or lean onto, kind of underneath that side, just to offload the pressure a little bit so it's not the full weight of your leg pulling you down into that stretch. And for some people that makes it a little bit more comfortable in those early phases when that hip is really tight. So just know that you have that option as well. It doesn't need to be a yoga block. It could be anything that you can lean down into, and that's totally fine. Just a thought. Play with those different knee positions. See if you need to bias it towards one direction in order to offload medial knee. But if you don't feel any medial knee pain, then you don't need to worry about that step here. We're going to do the same pails contraction on this side after our passive stretch. And then we're going to go up to the wall for some bilateral hip work. Now, if right now you can't do this stretch, you have to go up to the wall, or you can only do it on one leg, that's fine. I mean, you may as well just do it up on the wall and do both legs at the same time. But if you find that this gives you a better stretch, you could always do it on one leg this way and then hit both legs again in the other stretch with your feet up on the wall. That's absolutely fine as well. There's no big deal. You can personalize all this stuff to you, and that's one of the great things about it. We're going to take that opposite leg now. We're going to come up. You're going to block yourself. Now remember, at this point, we're not over-pressuring it further, and rather we're just using this to give us something to push into. Solidify that leg. Big breath in. Everything gets tight. Squeeze that left glute. Give me 20% effort trying to slowly drive out of it, thinking externally rotate. Work your way up to 40%. Keep that left glute anchored, pelvis tucked underneath you. Give me 50% and hold at 50%. And we're going to hold this for a little while. Again, trying to keep it an even 50%. Remember, we're just warming up here. Even though you're just warming up, if this is a new position for you, if you are not used to internally rotating that hip or training this tissue, it might feel exhausting. That's okay. It'll come with time as you consistently train it. Your capacity in that tissue will slowly start to increase. Now we've got another 6 seconds here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you can slowly come out of it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a block, we're going to place it between our legs. Legs are going to be up at 90 degrees. Anchor your hands to the ground, and then we're going to spin both thighs inwards such that our feet move away from each other. Hold for a few seconds, then bring it back in. We're just doing 3 reps here. Internally rotate, squeeze that side hip tissue, hold, bring it back in. One more time, internally rotate, squeeze and hold, bring it back in. Now this position that you're in right now, we're going to go right back into this position, but you're going to need your wall now. So set yourself up such that your feet are on your wall in this position, and I'll meet you there. All right, so this is the other position that you could do that stretch in, and that we're going to do our pails rails in for the higher intensity inputs. So if I disengage my feet from my wall, I spin my thighs inwards to see how much internal rotation I have, and then I place my feet on the wall there. That then sets me up at an angle which displays my current hip rotation mobility. Now I want more. In this class we're trying to gain more, so at that point you're then going to walk your feet out, just one wiggle to either side. Now if you get any pinching, pain, pressure, discomfort in the groin here, you have a few different variables you can play with. The first being that you could just slide yourself a little further away from the wall to open up this angle in the front, or you can actually change the width of the block between your legs, or the object between your legs, which will put you out into more abduction and often clear that sensation for a lot of people, or you can do a combination of those two things. Now, if in this position, let's switch back here, you need to do your stretch here, this would just be where you hang out and do your 2-minute passive stretch, okay? It's similar to how we did single leg. So we did one on each side lying on our backs. This is another option that you have available to you, and you get both legs done at the same time, which is kind of nice. But you might notice that it's not really as aggressive or as stretchy as that position down there. For a lot of people, they feel a better stretch with that one than they do with this one, but that one's too much for some people, in which case this is a good start point. Now we're going to do pails rails here, so we're not going to spend much time stretching. We've already done that. You're going to have your feet walked out, that one wiggle on either side. Your pails effort will be driving your feet into the wall towards each other. Now I want to make sure that you have the right direction with this, because your intent really matters, and if you're pushing the wrong way, you'll miss the tissue that we're going after. So you don't want to think press the wall away from you, like you're coming up from the bottom of a squat, nor do you want to think just squeeze the block between your legs. That's hip extension, this is hip adduction. We want hip rotation to hit that deep capsular stuff. So your intent is trying to drive your feet inwards towards each other by rotating your hips outwards. But I want you to grip the wall with your feet and make sure that you do not move at all. Then you're going to reverse, you're going to attempt to spin your thighs further inwards to peel your feet off the wall, and then we're going to hold that, okay? And that'll be our regressive angle contraction. So because we've done our 2-minute stretch already, we're going to get right into it. Make sure your ribs aren't super flared up right now. If they are, I want you to take those ribs, draw them back a little bit. Take a big breath in. Tighten everything up down both legs. Radiate fully. And now slowly start to think externally rotate. 20% effort trying to rotate those thighs outwards. Don't lose your block. Make your way up to 40%. Keep climbing 60%, 80%, and your greatest, safest, pain-free effort. Again, what you can do without pain, Always remember, just like it says in the beginning of the membership, if this is new to you, you don't need to go to max effort. You can start at lighter efforts and work your way up as you should. We're gonna hold this for a little while longer here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Reverse, find that side hip tissue, spin those thighs inwards, feet come off. If you get a cramp, embrace it, breathe through it if you can. If you can't, you can slowly ease off. Keep squeezing, keep holding. 3, 2, 1. Slowly return back to the wall. Very good. Now, if in this position that was quite challenging for you, you feel like this is a good working angle for you, you can stay here. If you want to take this a little bit further, you can then wiggle your feet out just a little bit more and do your next rep there. Make sure that you stay honest though. We don't want the pelvis moving. We don't want anything cheating. We want it all coming from the hips. We're going to do another rep here. Big breath in. Ribs stay tucked down. Slowly start to irradiate. 20% effort trying to rotate through that wall as if your feet are trying to come together, but you're not letting them. Make your way up to 40. Keep climbing. 60, 80, and your greatest, safest, pain-free effort. Give it your all. Trying to rotate out of that stretch. As you do that, I want you to squeeze your glute. Consciously send tension to the back of your hip. Continue to do that for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Throw it in reverse. Internally rotate. Squeeze that side hip tissue. Feet are moving as far apart from each other as you can. They've disengaged from the wall and you're holding. Don't let up. Keep holding, keep holding, keep holding. 3, 2, 1, parachute back to the wall. Okay, now we're going to go into some passive range holds in this same setup. So what that's going to look like is you're going to find your end range hip active internal rotation. So feet will come off again. Show me how far you can actively rotate out. Then walk your feet further, but make sure you don't get any pinching in the front of your hips. If you do, you'll only go as far as you can without that pinch. You'll walk those feet out. Then you're gonna do your very best to maintain that much hip rotation, keeping your feet as far apart as you can without losing that block, which is gonna keep you honest and accountable. You're gonna try and solidify that angle. Then you're gonna peel your feet off the wall and you're gonna try and hold that. Then we're gonna return back. You can walk it out a little bit further on each rep if you want to, but you should feel that side hip tissue working. Okay, and you may get cramps. It's very likely that a lot of people doing this are going to be cramping up. So if you get those cramps, don't worry, it's probably not just you. That's a sign that your nervous system doesn't really know how to use your hip in this position yet, and let's try and change that. Consistency and progressive overload will be your friend when it comes to getting away from those cramps, but if you don't train this stuff, you're going to keep cramping when you come back into it. So walk your feet out. Solidify yourself there. Nothing moves except your hips here, okay? Try to maintain your feet as far apart from each other as you can. It's just going to be your thighs coming towards your chest. We want to try to keep everything else the same, and that's our intent. Irradiate. Make those feet light on the wall first, then peel off and hold. 3, 2, 1. Parachute back. Walk them out. Solidify, lightly squeeze that block between your legs, don't lose it. Peel off. 3, 2, 1, parachute back. Big breath in. Solidify that angle and fight to maintain it. Hold. 3, 2, 1, parachute back. 3 more. You can walk those feet out, especially if you lost any range. Solidify that angle, peel off and hold. 3, 2, 1, bring it back. 2 more, feet come out, irradiate, hold. 3, 2, 1, parachute back. Last one here. Walk those feet out. Fight to maintain it. Make this your best one. Solidify. Feet come off. 3, 2, 1. Parachute back. Very good. Okay. Oh, goodness. Feet are going to come off. We're still going to need our wall, but now we're going to move on to our hands and knees. All right, so I'm going to take my block. I'm going to keep it between my legs, just like it was on the wall. Now in this position, we're going to do something very similar to what we just did, okay? But now you're just going to do it in a slightly different position. And with this one now, we've got a little bit of axial load going through our hip, such that there's force coming through our femur, kind of bowing into the back of that hip capsule. Now, if in this position you have any wrist pain, if you've got wrist issues, you have two options. You can either go up on 2 fists, you can grab another couple yoga blocks, and you can actually prop yourself up on your elbows like this. So if you had, say, 3 blocks, you could then do it from here, and that's totally fine. Or you can just go back to the position that you were just in, lying on your back, and that's always an option as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do some lift-offs here, okay? So I'm going to try not to allow my spine position to change, and I actually want you guys to bias lumbar flexion, okay? Which means tuck your tailbone underneath you and round your back a little bit. Often when people compensate for hip rotation, it's via extension and side flexion. So I want you to try and anchor yourself in the opposite direction. And we're going to do both hips at the same time, which is going to make it harder for you to cheat on one side because both legs are going to be moving away from each other. So find yourself here. Assess. Find how far you can move your feet apart. Take a peek back, and then that's going to tell you how far you need to be from the wall. I want you to set yourself up such that you can lift your feet off the wall, but not very far and not very easily. We're going to do lift-offs here rather than passive range holds. So on your hands and knees, tuck that tailbone underneath you, solidify your spine there, don't let it change. Big breath in, squeeze that side hip tissue, and then internally rotate, feet come off the wall, hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, slowly parachute back to the wall. Quick check, did you lose your pelvis position or your low back? If so, tuck it back underneath. Internally rotate, lift off. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, parachute back. Now when you lift off, I don't want you to think maintain this position. I want you to think fight for more. Squeeze that side hip tissue. Coming off for 3, hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, parachute back. Rotate, lift off for 4. Don't let that pelvis move. 4, 3, 2, 1, parachute back. Now last one here. Internally rotate, lift off, hold for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bring it on home. Very good. Okay. So we're going to meet each other back in side lying on our left side. So we're going to do some straight leg work here, okay? I've been mentally preparing myself for this. Now, what we're going to do is it's going to look kind of similar to a hip car, and it is a variation of a hip car. My top leg's going to be completely straight. My bottom leg could be whatever I want it to be. It could be up here, it could be down here, it could be straight, it could be bent. I really don't care. Play around with it, but put it somewhere where it helps you feel balanced. You don't want to feel like you're going to fall over one way or the other. Now, I'm probably going to want this guy for a little consolation here, or to hold out for an upper body tension strategy, whatever works for you. Most people will use that quite frequently, but just so you can see more of me, I will go without. Top leg, what we're going to do is we're going to internally rotate as far as we can to try and point our toes and our kneecap, so this guy here, down towards the ground. As you do that, again, do not let your pelvis go along for the ride. Don't let it drop inwards. You're going to internally rotate, and then you're going to fight for more of that rotation the entire time that you scour your hip. Now this one was in that other hip class that we did, so if you've done that class, you've done these before, but we're going to spice them up just a little bit today, and you'll see how. So what that'll look like, and I'll show you just one quick demo rep here. You're going to internally rotate. We're going to come all the way up into hip flexion. We're gonna open up into abduction, and the entire time we're trying to spiral for more rotation, we're gonna reach back into extension. We're gonna come back down underneath, and then we're gonna reverse, and we're gonna come back the same way that we came, fighting for that IR the whole time. And we're gonna do so way slower than I just did it, okay? So join me for this one. Big breath in, irradiate everything, internally rotate that leg, find that side hip tissue, and then keep those toes pointed downward. Keep that kneecap pointed downward by spinning that thigh inwards. Bring your foot up towards your face. When you run out of hip flexion, we're then gonna open up towards the ceiling. Keep fighting for that rotation, reaching back into extension. Keep fighting for that rotation. That back part is the hardest. We're gonna come back down, pause, and then we're gonna go right back into hip extension. Keep fighting for that IR. Now start to pull your heel towards your right ear. Come up, 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 and then back in front. Still fighting for that rotation, trying to spin that leg inwards the whole time, trying to keep your kneecap pointed down while keeping your belly button pointed forward. Rep 2, coming back up. All the way up into hip flexion. Open up into abduction. Keep internally rotating, reach back into extension. Hello, glute. Bring it back down underneath. Pause, and then going right back into hip extension. Open up into abduction. Come back through into hip flexion. Back down. Take a quick break, shake it out. We're gonna do one more rep, but follow my cues for this one, okay? Okay, legs straight. Internally rotate. Last one here, make it your best one. Nice and easy. Keep fighting for that IR. Keep trying to spin. When you reach your end range hip flexion, pause. Ask yourself, can you squeeze a little bit more out of it? Then open up towards the ceiling. Don't lose that rotation you just gained. When your heel is up towards the ceiling as high as you can get it, pause. Again, can you squeeze a little bit more out of it? Then we're gonna reach back into extension. Try not to lose that rotation. Try and fight for more. When your heel is directly behind you at terminal hip extension, you're gonna pause. Can you squeeze more out of it again? Then bring it back forward. Almost there. Straight back into extension. When you run out, make sure you don't have any more. Squeeze a bit more out. Then start pulling your heel up towards your right shoulder. Squeeze that side hip stuff. Pause. Rotate a bit more out. Bring it around in front. Find end range hip flexion. Fight for a bit more. And then bring it back down underneath. And we just spiced up that last rep. Now this like side, posterior hip, all this stuff should be talking to you. We're gonna give that side a break. We're gonna go over to the other side. All right, so you know what's coming now. We're doing that left leg. Left leg's completely straight. Internally rotate. Find your end range internal rotation. Now fight to maintain it. Fight for more of it as you pull up into hip flexion. Then you're gonna pause. You're gonna open up into abduction. Pause, reach back into extension, find that left glute, pull that heel behind you, keep your knee straight if you can. Keep fighting for that IR, come back underneath, and reverse, right back into extension. Open up into abduction. Come back in front. Back down. And rep 2. Shake it out if you need. Then we're going right back into it. Spiral that leg inwards. Up into hip flexion. Open up into abduction. Back into hip extension. Leg comes down. Glute is burning. And reverse. As you go through this, you may notice that your right leg is still working. And you're right. So that right leg is now doing the work to stabilize as you move your left leg. Okay, now shake this one out. We've got one rep left. So when you do this class consecutively over time, I recommend switching right leg versus left leg. when you start these sets. We're only doing one set, luckily for you. Luckily for me. Big breath in, everything's tight, follow my cues. Internally rotate as far as you can, slowly come up into hip flexion, find your end range. When you find it, pause, squeeze a bit more rotation out, open up into abduction. When you can't find any more abduction, pause, rotate a little bit more. Reach back into extension, do not lose that rotation. When your heel is at about parallel to the ground and heel's behind you, squeeze a bit more out, come back, we're halfway there. Right back into extension, squeeze a little more out, open up into abduction, squeeze a little bit more out, come forward into hip flexion. Again, rotate a little bit further and bring it back down. And that is it for today's class. Let me know how today's class went. I recommend sprinkling in some hip cars, whatever your favorite variation is, or the exercise that we did at the very beginning of class in side lying, just spinning our thigh inwards, foot coming up. Just touch base with that internal rotation throughout the rest of the day. Tomorrow, even over the next few days, keep blood flowing to that tissue. It'll help speed up recovery. Just make sure that you're not exhausting yourself every time you do it. The goal is not to go to exhaustion. It's just to keep sending blood flow there, keep touching and checking in with that range of motion that you just worked on and gained. And that'll help you move forward at a little bit faster pace. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we will see you for the next one.